I acknowledge the Kumameri people and the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander owners of the land where we gather today, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I recognise their connection to country and role in caring for and maintaining country over thousands of years. May their strength and wisdom be with us today.
While they're collecting their trophy and getting their photos, Virtual School Australia, or VSA, is an award-winning platform. It's been delivering empathy-driven education since 2016. Powered by dedicated volunteers, VSA combines academic excellence and social impact both locally and globally. VSA volunteers champion education in science, technology, engineering, arts and mathematics by developing and delivering engaging, hands-on programs in a safe, nurturing environment, particularly for refugee and low-income students. A core focus of VSA's volunteer programs include free online education for marginalised and vulnerable learners. And during the pandemic, VSA quickly responded with free online learning to support isolated students right around the world, a contribution that earned them the 2021 Blackboard Award for Teaching and Learning. VSA volunteers also support major community initiatives, from street plays addressing gender-based violence to mentoring young writers through the Elaine Hobson Memorial Literary Festival. VSA events like the Global Empathy Conference continue to foster deep connection and global dialogue. At the heart of everything VSA does are its passionate volunteers committed to empowering others through empathy, creativity, compassion and community engagement.
Congratulations to Team VSA, Virtual School Australia, for the commendable and outstanding work that you do every year, keeping empathy at the core of what you do. And congratulations to Paramita and to Rajeshri, to Marcelo, to every volunteer who has participated, dedicated their time, effort, thought, and heart to this conference, to this dialogue, and to this very meaningful discussions that are going to happen throughout today. And with that, I'm going to hand over to our conference chairperson, Marcelo Staricoff, professor at the University of Sussex, United Kingdom. Marcelo, all yours.
Thank you so much, Sharmila, and thank you so much, Paramita, for such a wonderful opening. It's incredibly momentous to have received that award, and it's fully deserved. Yeah, I know how hard and how inspirationally all of you work throughout the year to create something so transformational for society. And I know that the Global Empathy Conference is just one part of all the work that Virtual School Australia engages in. So it's a true representation of all your hard work, everyone involved, and it's something that will now live with all of us forever. And we hope that this award is the platform for many more initiatives to come. So I think we can all unmute and give the whole VSA team a huge clap, please. As chair, I wanted to welcome everyone very warmly and very empathetically to the second day of the 7th Global Empathy Conference. It's a great honor to be here in the role of chair, and it's a great honor to be part of such a wonderfully global audience and multidisciplinary audience. This is so special to be part of yesterday and of today. So a very warm welcome to you all. A very warm welcome to all of you that are returning after yesterday. And a very, very special and warm welcome to any of you that are joining us today for the first time. And we are so delighted and so honored that so many of you are joining these days, and that you're all contributing so much to how the days develop. Yesterday, the interactions, the constant comments from yourselves, your thoughts, your ideas were so instrumental in making the day so special for us all. So that engagement is truly unique. And we are very, very lucky in terms of what we are creating and what we were thinking, which would be fantastic, or what our wish is that these moments together don't become just once a year. So we are thinking very hard in terms of how we can keep the momentum going, how we can keep our combined thoughts and combined friendship and combined collaborations together from across the world, which is truly unique experience to be part of, and to see how we can promote that a further and more regular collaborations between us all at all times and during the year. I am delighted that today we have such a fabulous program ahead of us. We are incredibly lucky to have secured such wonderful speakers, keynote speakers, group speakers, session speakers from so many interesting areas that will really enrich the day that we have ahead of us. So I'd like to say right from the beginning, a huge and enormous thank you to all the speakers who have devoted so much time in preparing and in being here with us today to inspire different concepts and different ideas, all related to what empathy means to all of us. So I'm really delighted, and particularly delighted with our first keynote. I will introduce him formally when we come to the session, but Robin is Robin Banerjee, an incredibly influential and wonderful person from the University of Sussex. I work very closely with him, and he is really someone that on a daily basis with his work is transforming the lives and futures and life chances of people of all ages. So it's a true honor and true privilege to have him back. He joined us for the first time in Prague last year, and he was so wonderful. And he's back for another live session today. But yes, we are truly thankful for the program that's ahead of us, and we are so looking forward to all that's to come. So thank you all so much, and I wish you a very wonderful day ahead.
Yesterday, I attended some of the poetry panel, and then unfortunately had to step out, but it was an inspirational poetry panel. I was blown away by some of the deep thoughts, the depth of not only of thought, the nuance of empathy, of compassion, of people who probably have come out of war and they are healing. And those George Colburn's poems really resonated with me. Nancy's poetry about, how we have to fight the hatred and build empathy as individuals. That really resonated. As far as the panel discussion is concerned, the panel discussion on empathy was sensational because we got cultural perspectives from England, from the United States, from scholars from Kazakhstan, and it became a lively discussion about how we are personally affected, have been or are being affected by empathy, how it works in our professional lives, and then its role on the global stage. So it turned out to be a very profound and deep discussion, and we had some inspirational thoughts that came out. I would encourage you to look at that panel discussion and the poetry session in your own time. It was very meaningful, and a lot of it resonated with us all. Marcel, any thoughts?
Thank you so much, Sharmila. Yes, I'm still, when you're left with that feeling of what human warmth and human kind of fulfillment is the word. Human fulfillment for me was the message that I took home yesterday. I never expected, or I don't think I've ever experienced being so touched and so moved by the poets that we heard. And I was incredibly impressed by how poetry can transmit so much empathy, so much warmth, so much love for the world, but also for the people that the poetry was dedicated to. A lot of it was quite sad, wasn't it? A lot of it was poetry about loss, but it was done so beautifully that it was incredibly heartwarming. And I was thinking, again, this is another idea that we can all discuss now that we have a little bit of time in terms of how we move into the future with the Global Empathy Conference momentum that we're building, is the idea of listening and of meeting to listen to poets reading their own poetry more regularly. Because for me, what I took yesterday was the difference between reading a book, a poetry book, which is wonderful, versus listening to, in that round robin, to listening to the poets themselves reading their own poetry. So for me, that was incredibly valuable, and I would love to look for ways in which we can maybe once every 2 months or 3 months or 6 months gather together. And I am sure, as I have, which I read a little bit yesterday, I'm sure you all have examples of poetry that you've written, or short stories, or I don't know if you've heard of haikus. I'm a great fan of haikus as well, where the 575 syllables of Japanese poetry, which I love so much. I'm sure you all have examples that you may want to have a platform to share with each other. I think it's just, as I was saying yesterday, poetry and music for me are the two things that are so they transgress every society, every corner of the world. They're human. They promote humanness amongst all of us like nothing else. So anything that will bring us together through music and poetry, I'll be delighted to facilitate. Yeah, but it was such an amazing launch to the conference.
Just to let you know, Marcelo, we have one of the poets on our platform now. A
Oh,
very warm welcome to Nancy.
hello, Nancy. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Can
You
you hear
are.
me?
Did you hear
Thank
all the
you.
wonderful things we said about you?
Oh, yes, I have. And I'm really grateful.
I,
I'm really grateful.
with everyone I've met since, in the 24 hours since, I haven't stopped talking about you and the other three poets. It was just so powerful. And
Thank you. Thank you.
we were saying we've got a few minutes now until the first keynote.
Yes,
So if you wanted to share some more poetry, because there's some new people today,
thank you.
then we would be delighted.
I'm glad. I'm glad for the opportunity. And I do have 2 poems that I can share
Amazing.
with you at
The
this
floor
point.
is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, good evening, everyone. Here it is 10:30 p.m. Saturday night. My poem is entitled Who Qualifies? A poem in the spirit of empathy and oneness. It goes thus. Who qualifies for care? You ask, or you may wonder. Is there a form, a face, or a mask that must have hearts so pure, on voices grand, to earn a gentle helping hand? The answer roars from monumental peaks, from deserts harsh and river creeks. All who breathe and blink and be are hires to care internally. Who earns respect? The wealthy few? The ones with crowns or tailored shoes? Or is it those who toil unseen, with caroused hands and spirits keen? Respect is not a gilded price for only those with the world recognize. It is seated deep in every soul, a birthright all, a sacred goal. An honor, who deserves that light of honor, that shining star in darkening night? Is it the strong, the bold, the loud, or the ones who march ahead unbowed? No, honor bounds, it bends its knee to grace in every kind and loving face, the silent saint, the broken brave, the one who lifts what others brave. So ask not who, but why we endure, to rank the right to love and care. Each child, each elder, stranger too, reflects the light that lives in you. We rise, we fall, we laugh, we cry, beneath one sun, one sacred sky. No borders bind the soul's delight. We are stitched in threads of shared birthright. So lift the fallen, kiss the scar, sing peace to lands both near and far. Care is not earned, it's freely due. Respect is love the heart sees through. Honor's not rare, it is simply true. And all of this belongs to you. And that which belongs to you belongs to us. That's my first poem. Thank you.
So beautiful.
Thank you. May I go on with the second one?
Yes, please.
Thank you. This one is entitled Where the Heart Howls Loudest. Where the heart howls loudest, do not bring hush, bring presence. not the white-gloved whisper of avoidance, but the raw, red-knuckled stillness of staying. Let the wood scream its gospel. Let it split, flame and sob, ash and memory. Don't drape it in gauze, lies or offer. God never gives more than you can bear, is a poisoned meat. The broken don't need fixing. They need witnesses. Not surgeons, not saints, but open-hearted sentinels who sit at the mouth of the cave and refuse to flee when the monsters crawl out, wearing the skin of memory. Be the oak that does not speak, but shades the scorched earth. Be the moon that does not pry, but casts gentle silver on what shatters in the dark. Trauma is not a polite guest. It claws its way out of silence, like a pupa's war with its shelf, oozing truth and tremor in every twitch towards flight. To help is not to crack the chrysalis. The butterfly would bleed unwinged. No, help is to nod like the tide nods to the shore, a rhythm that says, I will not leave. Let the afflicted rage. Let them unravel like ancient scrolls. You're not their glue, you are their lantern, and that is enough. More than enough, that is everything. Thank you.
So beautiful, Nancy. And
Thank
again,
you.
such beautiful comments in the chat. You have such a unique way of captivating the audience and transmitting your words to us. It's just wonderful privilege to be in your presence, Nancy.
Thank you.
Well, since we've got a few minutes, I might take the decision to finish the poem that I started reading yesterday. And this arose by sharing with the audience something that I believe very deeply in terms of the part that this plays in education and in society and in humanity. That also is supported, well, it's beautifully described by Nelson Mandela when he said, if you speak to somebody in the language of instruction, it goes to their head. If you speak to them in their own language, it goes to their heart. So taking that on board, and I'm always been really fascinated in the conditions that we create in classrooms that enable students to want to engage. So that what causes intrinsic motivation, which is, for me is then the key to thriving as a student. And I think that being allowed to function and access the learning in heritage language plays a really big part in that scenario. A personal experience very personal experience of mine is when I came from Argentina. I was 11, and I came to the UK and went straight into secondary school without speaking a word of English. So for the first year or so, I was really lost in the classes. I was just looking out the window and not doing anything. I just wasn't able to access the curriculum, but not because I couldn't access it cognitively, is because language was the barrier. So in my book, I close in The Joy of Not Knowing. I close the book. The last chapter is called Multilingual Thinking in Multicultural Classrooms, to make sure that every child feels able to use all the richness of language and culture that they have with them in the everyday teaching and learning process, which is really, really special. And with that in mind, when, as I was saying yesterday, when I was the head teacher of a infants and nursery school, as we call it in the UK, so children from 3 to 7 years old. We worked with a poet, Roger Stevens, and the children then they all wrote a poem each, and we published it as a book called Once Upon a Slime, which is here. And to introduce it, I wanted to write a poem, and as I said yesterday, for me, writing poetry, which I love to do, I still, even though it's more than nearly 50 years since we've come to England, I'm still writing. When I write poetry, I write from the heart, and that is Spanish for me still. So I wanted to share with you in Spanish the beautiful poem that I wrote for the preface of this book when I was the head teacher. And then what I was saying yesterday is that the translation in English to me is we have got it, but it's just really meaningless in terms of the feelings and the ideas that it conveys. So here it goes. And I hope that some of you, as yesterday, are able to understand Spanish or can Google Translate. So here goes. Un canto para Hartford, a song for Hartford. That was the name of the school. Aquí me pongo a cantar al compás de mi escuela, con todos los chicos adentro, aprendiendo tanto cada día, me toca a mí ser el centro de toda nuestra filosofía. Alegres y contentos los veo siempre a todos, con tantas ganas de saber más que antes y con tantas preguntas tan interesantes. So many interesting questions. No hay fin a la curiosidad. There's no end to your curiosity. Que les surge a esta edad. That's so natural at this age. Los veo por todo tan interesados que es un placer increíble. Nunca se los ve cansados o discutiendo o peleados, pero sí siempre tan entusiasmados de tratar hasta lo imposible. So always really enthusiastic to try even what seems impossible, which again is a trait of that young age, I think. Que la escuela les esté dando todo para el futuro. Hope school is giving you everything for the future. Para que nada en su vida sea duro, es lo que siempre voy pensando. Para que puedan siempre disfrutar de sus vidas con alegría y mucho para cantar. Hope that the school provides you everything so that in your lives you can live it with alegría, happiness, and a lot to cantar, to say, to write, to communicate. So that was my contribution for today.
I did not understand, but there's something about the language that was really appealing to me, the cadence of it. Thank you for sharing.
It was a pleasure. Well, very warm welcome, Robin. So lovely to see you.
Hello. Hello. Sorry, I went to the day one link first, but I found it now. It is a pleasure to be here. Lovely
Well, subconsciously, we wish we had you in day one as well.
so kind. How has the conference been going? I'm sure it's been wonderful. I saw the email today.
Yeah, we
and it
launched
sounds
today, Robin, by saying that I was just saying that I've never experienced a day like yesterday, in terms of how it made me feel. Luckily, we've got it all recorded, so you will have the chance to share in it all. The main basis of yesterday was four incredible poets who were just so amazing in how they said, how they read their poetry, what they said,
and from different countries as well, right?
From different countries as well. Yeah, we had from the USA, from Canada, from Kenya.
Yes.
Yes. And yeah, amazing. Yeah. And one of mine as well
Oh, that's
in
so
Spanish.
lovely. I can't wait to see the recording. That sounds absolutely amazing.
Yes. Well, it's so, so wonderful to see you, Robin, and to have you with us. Just seeing you is so heartwarming as always.
Thank you.
Um, when we introduced the day today, I spoke a lot about you and how amazing you are and how you transform lives at every age with everything that you do on a daily basis. So we are
Only
so
because
honored
I'm surrounded by people like you, Marcelo, honestly.
and so privileged to have you, Robin. So I'd like to, it gives me a huge, huge honor, and it's a great privilege for us to be introducing now our first keynote speaker for the evening, um, which is Professor Robin Banerjee from the University of Sussex. And Professor Robin Banerjee is a professor of developmental psychology and the inaugural, that means the first one, Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Global and Civic Engagement at the University of Sussex. And you could not have a more global audience today, Robin. So it's really, really exciting. And the other thing I was saying, Robin, which we can chat about afterwards, is that we want to keep the momentum on what we've created these 2 days going. Keep we not just for this to be a one-off scenario. So we're looking for ways of discussing how that might happen. So Robin was formerly head of the School of Psychology, and his research focuses on the social and emotional development of young people. And he works closely with practitioners and policymakers in the areas of education and mental health. He founded the very famous now Sussex Centre for Research on Kindness, an interdisciplinary research centre focused on illuminating the nature of kindness and its impact on people and communities. Professor Banerjee recently led the Kindness Test, a partnership which was in partnership with the BBC in the UK, that became the world's largest ever public science project on kindness. So this shows you how lucky we are to have Robin with us. He's an expert advisor to the EmpathyLab, an organization that works with schools, libraries, and other community stakeholders to promote empathy and reading for pleasure through the power of children's books. We are so delighted, Robin, and I still remember every word from Prague from your talk.
Oh, that's so
So
kind of
thank
you.
you.
What a lovely introduction. Thank you so much, Marcelo. It's a pleasure to be with you, excuse me, and to be part of a global empathy conference. I can't think of anything finer, and how wonderful to be able to see people joining from all over the world in the spirit of empathy. And I hope you'll enjoy sharing in the work that we've been doing in this area at Sussex. I'm going to be talking about the work on empathy and kindness in context, and I'm going to try and share my screen if I can. Let me see if this works so that you can then see. Does that work? Can you see that all right? Perfect.
Yeah.
I've got a thumbs up from Marcelo, so I'm going to go ahead.
Brilliant, Robin. Yeah, very clear.
So I'm going to be talking about placing empathy and kindness in context, and I'm talking here about relational context. It's all about social relationships. So that's why I'm going to be focusing on understanding relationships and the links with mental health and well-being, particularly in schools. But Marcelo, I hope this is all right this time. So I'm going to start very similar to how I started last year's talk, and I'm going to end in a very similar way to how I ended last year's talk. But I'm going to also expand the reach a little bit and talk about some more work that I'm doing beyond schools as well, because I
Amazing.
think actually the truth is the school community doesn't end at the school gates. The school
Mm,
community
mm,
reaches
mm.
right out into the world. And I wanted to think a little bit about the destinations where empathy and kindness might be having some real impacts and where they might be needed more than ever at the moment. But I'm going to start in the usual way I always start by just sort of orienting you to my background and my area of research focus, which is fundamentally, as a developmental psychologist, on the mental health and well-being of children and young people. And I've already said the key context that I want to put this into is the context of social relationships. And it might seem obvious to you that the way that our relationships are working out for us makes a huge difference to our mental health and well-being. But I've also always emphasized, and I remember saying this at the talk last year, I've always emphasized the point that it's very easy to fall into the trap of imagining that mental health simply sits inside a child or a young person's head as if it's a property of that individual, and we forget about the social relational context. We start thinking the challenge is, right, which children have got this mental health difficulty, or which children have got these well-being issues or problems? What are we going to do with those individual children? And we lose sight of the fact that actually, quite often the answer isn't what are we going to do about that individual child? Quite often the answer is what are we going to do about the environment around the child? What are we going to do around the context within which that child is developing? And relationships are absolutely at the heart of that context. So I want you to keep that in mind as I go through this presentation. The other thing I wanted to emphasize, and I always do this, especially when I'm talking with an audience that have engagement with education, is that this stuff on the top of the screen, mental health and well-being and social relationships, this stuff is intimately connected with the stuff on the bottom of the screen, academic engagement and achievement outcomes. And yet again, that's another mistake that is so easy to fall into making. So often we end up making the mistake of thinking that mental health and relationships is one thing over here, and then your academic engagement and the sort of the business of schools, and many people think about it as a core business of schools, the academic learning, the achievement, how you do on exams and things like that is over here. Well, I'm here to emphasize again and again, actually, those two things go together and actually they go hand in hand. And when you stop to think about it and just think about your own learning experience, you know that if we're in a really difficult emotional state, if we're really struggling in our relationships, actually, that is not the best condition for learning, right? And we need to get the relationships right. We need to get the emotional well-being right in order to be able to support every young person to achieve his or her academic potential. So I'm going to keep emphasizing that point. And it always starts with relationships. And I'm going to keep circling back to that. Now, last year, I remember I showed this diagram. This is what's known as a sociogram. Uh, Teachers often, and this is not something I've invented, by the way, this has been around for many, many decades. Teachers used to do these by hand, and it's a right pain to do it by hand. Now, fortunately, we have a computer that can generate it in a few seconds, which is very, very helpful. What is it generating? Well, it's generating a map of the social connections within any given group of individuals. And I've done this with young children, I've done it with children in college. You can go to any age group, and it's not just about children. You can do it with any social group. And you are simply asking the kids, who do you most like to hang out with? Or who do you most like to play with? Right? And that's what these arrows represent. And the job of the computer in mapping it all out is to try and map out the social connections in such a way that it's actually easy to read and is legible and so on. And what you can see here in any given classroom, there's a huge variation in how children are getting on at any given point in time. And remember, this is just a point in time. These names are all made up, by the way. But look at Nadia here. Nadia has many arrows pointing to her. Many kids say that they most like to hang out with her. She's in that fortunate position of, and by the way, these labels have been around for a long time. They're just based on statistical cutoffs, so don't get too hung up on them. But in the literature, she would be regarded as being in the so-called popular peer status category. On the other hand, look at Rio. Rio makes his nominations. I'd most like to hang out with Joseph, Chris, and Nathan, and unfortunately, not one of them nominates him back. And in fact, we can tell from the color coding, he's actually attracted quite a lot of negative nominations where kids are saying, this is someone that I typically wouldn't like to hang out with, right? And that is a situation, you can see the color coding here, that is associated with statistically a category that in the literature has been referred to as a peer rejected category. It is just a moment in time. And please remember that. This is not a kind of a life sentence. However, even though these things can change even within a day, for some children, and unfortunately for some of those young children who are experiencing rejection within their peer group and are really struggling in their social relationships, sometimes those patterns can be durable over days, weeks, months, and yes, even sometimes years. And that is a very difficult relationship position to be in. And I think every one of us can identify to a greater or lesser extent the challenge of feeling that you don't belong, that you're feeling that you're not connected. And that is a really difficult emotional state to be in. And, with the best will in the world, simply saying to the children, and frankly, saying to if someone was to say to me, if I was in that state, and I know I've been in that state at times during my childhood, and still now you could experience that state at any given point, saying to that person, well, never mind about all that now because we've got to focus on our math class or we've got to focus on our history syllabus. That is a big, big ask, right? It's a big ask. And what I want to talk about today is the role of empathy and kindness, not just in terms of how that can be important for being socially successful as an individual. I want to talk about empathy and kindness in the context of the whole social group, in the context of the whole social community. And Marcelo, in your introduction, you referenced my research centre that I founded, the Sussex Centre for Research on Kindness. And I have to say, it has been an absolute pleasure to see it grow and to see it develop in such interesting and unexpected ways. And I think that's one of the lovely things at Sussex. University of Sussex has always been, from its very inception, a very interdisciplinary space. And yes, I started off the work on kindness thinking very much about school life and what does a kind school really mean. But through conversations with colleagues in Sussex, before I knew what was happening, we had people who were interested in looking at this topic of kindness and the development of empathy in the medical school. Actually, the co-director of the centre, Karen Patterson, is a clinician. She's a specialist in respiratory medicine. She's a co-director of our research centre because she really recognized right from the outset this is fundamental to life in medical institutions, right? Kindness, empathy, compassion. It's fundamental. But it's not just in medical institutions. You'll listen to that and think, yeah, that makes sense. Medical institutions, that's a place where you'd certainly want to see a lot of kindness and compassion, and you'd see that every day. But we also found it in really hard-nosed business contexts as well. People thinking about business life and actually and this one is sometimes a bit of a stretch and people do struggle with it sometimes, but people thinking, hang on a second, you might be thinking that kindness and empathy somehow doesn't go hand in hand with, the cutthroat dog eat dog kind of world of business where it's all competition and being agile and, getting there first and all of that. But fundamentally, what so many people working in organizational psychology have done is shown that people need to connect with each other in order to get the best out of any situation, maybe even especially when there is a really challenging competitive context. And so I'm really pleased to say in the business world, this is beginning to get a lot of traction. I'm going to give you a couple of different examples from other areas as well. But you can imagine, right? International aid, education, social work, medicine, politics, anthropology, all of these different areas, you can make the connection with kindness and empathy because these are fundamental to people and their relationships. So I talked about some of that last time I came and spoke at this conference. What I wanted to do was backtrack a little bit this time. I wanted to give you a little bit of a context of how I came into this area of research and talk a little bit about the research studies that I've been doing that have made me start thinking about all of this. And then I'll try and take you up to the present day with the kind of things that I'm doing in different contexts now. The key thing I want to make clear here is that we're dealing with multiple facets of human functioning. Okay, on one level, and I often say with people, start with this because it's what you can see in front of you. Start with behavior. You can see the behavior, and we know, like, I think we can probably all identify behavior that we have experienced as being really kind in our lives. And we certainly, I bet every one of us can identify behavior that we've experienced as being very unkind in our lives as well. That kind of sticks with you as well, right? So behavior is there, noticing it and noticing all the different nuances of it is really important. But of course, I am coming from a psychological perspective, so I'm going to dig down underneath that behavior and I'm going to ask you to think about feelings, emotions. What are those kinds of nuanced experiences that might be driving behavior and then responding to behavior? And then also, this isn't just about a kind of a non-thinking emotional response. I often say this about, I think actually last time when I was talking, I talked a lot about the cognitive aspects of empathy. Cognition is really important. How is a child or young person, or indeed an adult, thinking about the world? We need to pay attention to that as well. How do they make sense of what's happening in the world? And my goodness, look around you in the world right now. Making sense of it is pretty tough. But what are the stories we tell about it? And what are the stories we tell about ourselves? What am I like? What are other people like? What is the world like, right? These are the kinds of things that often don't get spoken about, but they're so important to understanding and to empathizing in a school context or indeed any other context. And then another one that I want to emphasize is motivation. What's driving you? What's motivating you? And again, just thinking about a school context again, when you've got a class of children in front of you, and Marcelo, you'll know this very well yourself from all your years as a head teacher. When you've got a class of children in front of you, you know that they're not all wanting the same thing as you do as a teacher, right? You might go in thinking, I've got my lesson plan, I've got my lesson objectives, I know what I want to achieve in this lesson. Those motivations may not be shared by all of the children in the class at that particular moment. There might be a lot of other things going on. They might be wanting a bunch of other things relating to actually something outside the class entirely, right? So we really need to pay attention to all of those different dimensions. And as I've said again and again, and sorry, I'm a broken record on this point, never forget about the relational context. Always look at these things in the relational context. And I wanted to take you back it's 15 years now, to the work of my PhD student at the time, Kay Matheson. She is a brilliant early years practitioner and policymaker. She'd worked in early years for all of her career, and then she chose to come back to Sussex to do a PhD with me because she knew that she wanted to get at some stuff in some real detail and some real depth to actually take her brilliant early years expertise to a new level. And she did a PhD with me on nursery school children's early emotional development. And we were working, this was one of the studies that we published from that time. And we were working at that time with children aged 2 to 3 years old. And for some of them, it was really their first proper experience in a kind of a educational focused nursery environment. Okay. And they were interacting with lots of different children and with lots of different adults. And one of the things we did was we did a very simple, and these were standardized assessments. We did some very simple standardized assessments using some sort of little doll puppets, actually, puppet characters with different facial expressions and so on. And we actually went through a standardized process to just tap into their ability to recognize and label different emotions. And we're only, they're young children, right? We're talking about happy, sad, and cross, or angry, right? Or happy, sad, and mad, right? We're talking about basic emotions. But already at 2 years old, children vary. And I guess a question I won't get into right now, but I'll leave you to think about is why is there variation already at 2 years old in recognizing and labeling simple emotions like happy, sad, and cross or angry? Okay, but there is. And what we found, which was really fascinating, was that how they performed on those tasks that we did, these standardized lab tasks that we did with the 2 to 3 year olds, was strongly predictive of how, and this was all done completely independently, and we had actually the nursery practitioners independently rating the way the children played with each other. Okay, so each child was rated in terms of their play patterns. So based on their observations of the children, we asked them to describe how the children were playing. Okay. And they didn't know how the children had performed on the emotion recognition task or anything. So it was completely independent part of the study. But what we found was this strong predictive relationship. The children who were better able to recognize and label emotions at this very young age played in what in the research literature has been described as a more interactive style, as opposed to what we also measured, which was a disconnected style or a kind of more sort of oppositional, defiant, externalizing style, okay? The interactive peer play involved things like sharing toys, helping other children, showing positive emotions, comforting others during their play, okay? These were those positive social skills. As I would imagine when you look at those, you're thinking, yeah, those are the kinds of positive social skills we'd love to see in young toddlers. As they're growing up, they're going to build on those, and that's going to enable them to be really rounded human beings, able to interact socially very well. But look at that predictive relationship. It starts early. As early as 2 years old, and quite probably even earlier than that, we know that there are basic differences in being able to tune into each other. And I want you to keep thinking about the relational context. What could we do to enable children to tune into each other? Let me fast forward a little bit, okay? Now these are 5 to 6 years old. We tested, now they're a little bit more capable in terms of their verbal skills. We tested their early social understanding, again, using a whole range of different tasks. Now it's not just about happy, sad, and cross. Now we're asking questions about what a person is thinking, and even situations where someone is thinking something that actually you know is not true, but understanding that even though I know it's not true, they think that that's the case, and so they're going to act on it. We can do those kinds of tasks with a 5 or 6 year old, right? Well, what does that predict? It turns out that predicts how, now we're moving to the second year of school, 6 to 7 years old, that predicts how the next year's teacher rates their pro-social behavior. Okay? So again, more sophisticated now because they're 5 years old rather than 2 years old. They're really beginning to tune into what someone else is thinking, what someone else is feeling, understanding that they might have a different view to what I do. You know, those kinds of nuances, and it predicts pro-social behavior. It predicts, if you can put it this way, kindness. Okay, and that in turn is a really important predictor for where they end up the following year of the school. So now we're in 7 to 8 years old. We looked at where they were on that sociogram, that diagram that I was showing you before. And lo and behold, those children who are more tuned in at age 5 or 6 experience less peer rejection, greater peer acceptance. Okay. And let me just add this one point I said before about the fact that this stuff is not somehow separate from academic achievement. We followed the children 1 year later beyond that. We wrote this study up a little bit later. It was really interesting because look what we found we could predict the following year, or maybe this was actually 2 years later. We tested the children ourselves. We didn't rely on anyone else to do the testing. We directly tested ourselves the math and verbal skills of the children the following year. the literacy skills and the numeracy skills. And what we found was a positive association. It's fascinating, right? The social context really matters. And importantly, how children are able to tune into each other in that social context really matters. And by the way, very important to say, in all of these analyses, we controlled for the child's general cognitive ability. This wasn't down to a child being generally, brighter or smarter than another child, okay? This isn't about general cognitive ability or IQ. This is about social, emotional life. And it's fundamental to how children get on at school. And just to say, I'll do one more little bit of this kind of backdrop to how I got into this work. This was a more recent study. We were looking at the first year of secondary school now, and we were following a group of children as they're making that transition during the first year of their secondary school. And that's a time when you can experience quite a lot of anxiety, right? That's quite normative. Well, now you can imagine these are 11 to 12-year-old children. So we're doing, again, these are all lab standardized assessments, okay? Even more sophisticated tasks. Now we're looking at things like understanding double bluff, understanding sarcasm, picking up when someone's being ironic, those kinds of things. Really working out what's going on in a situation where there's been a social misunderstanding, where one person does something, but they didn't mean to upset this other person. They just didn't grasp something. Those kinds of nuances, everyday social life that we all encounter. Okay. That's what we're able to measure in 11 to 12-year-old children. And again, there are differences. Children are not all the same. They've all had their own unique life stories, and those stories matter. It turns out that social understanding made a difference to the critical thing which is happening in that first year of secondary school, which is dealing with the anxiety of being in a new, often much bigger environment and coping with it. Well, what helps you to cope? What helps you to cope is feeling like you're connected, feeling like you're tuned in. And again, I want to emphasize this point to you, so important. This is not just about the individual child. This is about the whole group together, right? What we've really got to understand is how do we nurture the skills of tuning into each other, of empathizing with each other, and therefore being kind to each other. How do we nurture that within a school environment? Because guess what? When you do that, things generally work out better. Like in this particular case, what we showed was that by the end of the year, those children were displaying significantly better peer relationships. They were more positive, more pro-social. And to be honest, I could track all of that right back to that first study that I talked about when Kay Matheson was doing that work with me with the nursery school children, right? All those same things, comforting others, helping others, sharing with others. Those are the qualities we're trying to cultivate in the school context. And all of these things are developing and unfolding for each child within a social context. Now, one important thing that I want to emphasize is this, that these things are malleable. And they don't, we always say we want to start early where we can. And I would say, absolutely, we want to try and build these skills from the word go in early year settings. And many really good early year settings do exactly that. But I wanted to show you that it's not a situation like, if you don't do this work early on, then you've completely missed a boat and then you're fixed for life. That is not the case, okay? These things are not fixed for children. There is a huge amount of malleability in children's lives, plasticity in their brain development, and those things can happen much later in childhood. So this study actually, if I remember correctly, this was a pair of studies that we did. Again, with my collaborators, this is actually work that we've been doing together in northern Italy. Fascinating stuff. This was with 9 to 10-year-old children, okay? And even then, what we showed was that we could take a bunch of children, randomly allocate them into different conditions, the experimental condition where we were actually using stories, and I'm going to come back to stories in a second, using stories to promote social understanding in groups of children, okay? We could put them randomly into these two groups, and we could see an effect of this experimental manipulation. So we tested, of course, first of all, that when we split them randomly, they really were randomly set up and there weren't any differences between the groups at the beginning. That's what you can see right here at pretest. No difference in the score on social understanding. But then you can see how much of a difference, and these stars indicate that there was a statistically significant difference, how much of a difference was made through a really lovely intervention where we got children to work in groups and talk with each other about the kinds of situations that I was describing before, about situations where one kid was being sarcastic, where one kid was misunderstanding what was going on in the playground, where a teacher got the wrong idea of what was going on and said something that didn't match the situation. All of those kinds of nuances of everyday life involving tuning into each other. And we got the children to talk about it and we guided them, we facilitated the discussion. And I will say in these two studies, we did that work. So our researchers, we actually had university students who were going in and doing the studies. Our researchers followed a really careful kind of script and went in and ran the studies in a very controlled experiment. But since these studies, we've also done the work where we've actually handed it over to teachers, the regular teachers in the school classrooms, and guess what? It worked just as well. So I've been really pleased to see that in a regular classroom environment, just using nothing more than talking about stories, having a conversation, you can strengthen social understanding. And just to say, these effects do last over time as well. When we do follow-up studies as well, we're able to show that the effect is still there. Okay. So I do want to emphasize books and stories. And I told you last time that we're doing this research. I think I showed this exact slide. We're doing this research study at the moment. We're nearly at the end of it. We're just in the middle of the last study. Last year, we were halfway through. Now we're nearly at the end of it. And the study is all about reading, because there's actually growing evidence that reading fiction, reading books, and importantly, talking with people about those books does improve children's empathy and pro-social skills. So we're not quite there yet with the final results, but maybe next time we come to the Global Empathy Conference, I'll be able to tell you the results from that study. But I really wanted to emphasize this point that schools do make a difference, right? They are sites of positive change. And I think I know that many of you are working in that space already. What we do in schools matters. And I just wanted to highlight this study. This got a lot of attention back then. It was in 2011, so nearly 15 years ago. Joe Durlak and colleagues published this meta-analysis of studies focused on social and emotional learning, demonstrating that school-based social and emotional learning programs do make significant improvements. And they make significant improvements to all of these things. But one of the things which caught a lot of people's attention as well was this last point, that it made a big difference also to achievement test scores as well. And in some ways, I'm like, well, I kind of think just getting those improvements on those first 5 points is like worthy in themselves. Yeah, those points are quite worthy in themselves. But we have to be realistic, I guess. There are a lot of pressures in school environments. There's a lot of high stakes testing. There's a lot of focus on standardized tests. And so it's not surprising people are interested in, is it going to make a difference to academic results? And the actual outcome from this analysis was, hey, guess what? Yes, it does. On balance, overall achievement test scores tend to improve after social and emotional learning engagement. But there was also something really important, which is that you need to implement it well. Okay, it's not just saying, oh, here's some materials, go and deliver that, and then it's all going to be okay. You can't just put a bunch of leaflets into a school staff room and expect that that's going to somehow transform the school environment and transform children's learning. Of course not. You have to implement it well. And what I've been doing a lot of over the years is focusing on actually weaving it into the fabric of the whole school environment. And so I've done a lot of work looking at how whole school universal approaches. So it's not just about the kids with problems, like I was talking about before. It's not just about one teacher who does that work with the kids who've got difficulties. It's about a whole school environment that is focused on these social and emotional dimensions of learning. Okay. When you do that, when you weave it into the fabric of the school community, when it's infused in everything that people do and how they talk with each other. And let me be clear as well, not just how the kids are behaving, it's also how the staff are behaving with each other, right? Not just how the staff are behaving towards the children, not just what the staff are teaching the children, how the staff are interacting with each other in their workplace. That makes a difference. That's part of the whole school environment. And when you do that, when we've done anonymous surveys, as we did in this study, people report a more positive social and emotional school ethos. People report, the pupils themselves reported much more positive peer experiences. But look what we also found. Higher attainment results on the headline standardized test scores, and we also found lower levels of persistent absence in those schools, okay? And fast forward 10 years, we've been doing a lot of work around mental health approaches in schools and colleges in the UK. And you can see this is guidance from Public Health England, which is a government funded body which focuses on public health in the for the whole of the country. They've emphasized this whole school and college approach, very much informed by work like what I've been describing to you, making it clear this isn't just about individual pupils with mental health difficulties. This is about the overall ethos and the environment. Yes, there is some targeted support with individuals who need it, but it's about the curriculum for everyone. It's about staff development. It's about student voice. It's about working with parents and carers. And I just wanted to show you the work that we've been doing, where this is fairly recently, in the last few years, we've been doing lots of work around sort of trying to gather best practices in schools and colleges for how people are doing this kind of stuff, because we need to learn from each other, right? This is about partnership working. You can see that last point I said, partnership working with different services. It's about the health services, the education services working together, and the social care services working together. It's about supporting staff well-being. It's about integrating mental health into the curriculum. So it's not like a situation where, and I think this sometimes does happen, it's not like a situation where you have a great class focused on mental health and social support, and then the children leave that class and they go out into a math class or a history class or the school canteen or go home on the bus, and there's no mention of mental health, no awareness, no thinking about it at all. We can't have that, right? We need to make sure this is permeating the entire school community. And that's much more easily said than done. But there is good practice out there. And we've actually been developing, and these are tools which are freely available. We've been developing some, based on our work most recently, we launched this only last year, digital toolkits for schools and colleges to self-assess where they are in terms of implementing a whole school or college approach to mental health and well-being, and also to assess some of the outcomes from that work as well. And it's completely non-judgmental. No one's getting sort of judged by anyone else about it. This is just schools and colleges to feel empowered to be able to just check in and see how we're doing. What are we doing? Are there spaces where we could be doing more? Are there gaps where actually we could be doing more? And also, what's been working really well that we can celebrate, because that's really important. So that's the kind of stuff that I've been doing. But I did say to you at the beginning, I promised you I'd be talking a little bit about the direction of travel that we've gone into in some other areas. So I'm going to do that for the last little bit, okay? Oh, and this is, I think I showed this slide last year for 2024. This is the 2025 Empathy Day. It's on 12th June 2025. Please check it out, EmpathyLab.uk. It's the organization I've been working with for a long time. It's focused on children's books and reading. and how that is a vehicle for promoting empathy and social change. And I tell you what, we don't have a presence in other countries yet. This is very much a UK-based thing. But if you guys want to get involved, well, please do. Just, there's lots of live streamed events and things like that. Go to the website and check it out and participate if you're interested. Lots of free resources there as well. So, what could we do from a school context that could be nurtured and taken into another context? Well, I just want to give you this one snapshot from a lovely primary school in Sussex, which shared with me the work that their children had been doing. So these are only from 4 to 11 years old, okay? They started out with a bare tree, just the tree trunk and the branches, nothing on them. And they asked the children, when you see someone being really kind, write it down. Write down what was it, what was happening, who was doing it, celebrate it, stick it on our kindness tree. And I was delighted at the end of term to come back and see the bare tree had been replaced by this. It was just lovely, and the children were so proud of it, and they talked me through it, and many of them showed me the specific examples. I remember this is the leaf that I stuck on the tree because so-and-so was really kind to me in the playground, and it was just a lovely moment. Now, I want you to think about how could we scale that up and apply that to other contexts. Well, the most recent area of work that I've been taking part in, something I didn't know anything about before, but I'm learning a lot about it over the last few years, is this, courts of law. Now you might think, kindness in courts of law. Really? Well, we started this in 2022. I think last year I talked about the work that I did on the BBC project, and Marcelo, you mentioned it in your introductory remarks. We did do a very big project on the BBC. Well, colleagues at the Bar Council, which is responsible for the courts of law and all the barristers who work in the courts of law, some of them saw the work that we'd done on the BBC and they were really interested, and they got in touch with me and said, would you come and work with us? Because we're really interested in kindness as a route to promoting well-being for barristers and all of those working in the courts of law. And I said, I don't know anything about the legal profession. I don't know anything about barristers' lives. And they said, it's okay, because we want you to listen. We want you to hear us and help us to think together about how we can move forward. And so we did that. And what I learned, I just want to give you a few quotes from this, okay? What I learned was really fascinating. I learned that in the courts of law, and of course, right? Advocacy in the courts of law takes place in a very adversarial context. That's the nature of it, right? You're fighting against each other. You've got the prosecution and you've got the defense, right? But it was really interesting to hear that so many people, so many barristers, even the very senior barristers, the King's Counsel or the Silks, or the juniors who are right at the beginning of their careers, they felt that collegiality was fundamental underpinning of the law. You can see this. I think certainly at the criminal bar, there's a powerful sense of collegiality between barristers, so that even if you're on opposite sides in a case, almost all the time, you can have dialogue with your opponents and you can achieve mutual support, particularly if it's a stressful case. Yes, there's a cut and thrust in the courtroom, but outside the courtroom, there's a great deal of solidarity and collegiality. And then as one of the younger new barristers said, one of the juniors said, if your opponent is kind, you're sort of in it slightly together. For me, it's the people who have the emotional intelligence to tell the difference between the fact that I disagree with your position, but I still care how your grandma is, because the last time I saw you, you said she wasn't well, right? Now, there are a lot of challenges in the bar, and this is what I learned from speaking with senior judges, from speaking with the senior barristers, the silks. As this silk here said, if you're instructed to win. You're instructed to win the best possible the best possible outcome for your client. That's the job you're given. And some people, I was fascinated to hear this language. Some people talked about there being a kind of culture of younger barristers needing to become, and this was a word actually that was used, bloodied, like you had to be broken in so that you'd become a really good advocate and you'd be able to think on your feet. And it was really interesting in the conversations and focus groups that I was having. They were really thinking about what did that mean for people and what did that actually do for some of the younger people. And, there were good reasons for some of it. Like a judge said, we have a duty to be fair and impartial. An act of kindness can't be perceived as showing favoritism to one side or another. But there was this real issue. Many people felt sometimes not broken in, they just felt broken, humiliated, because they were in that environment where they just didn't experience the kindness. But it doesn't have to be like that, right? Where does it come from? Always think of the social context. As this person said, you inherit traits from your pupil supervisor, from those that you're seeing in court. If those people are aggressive, macho bullies, then you think, oh, to win this case, I need to do that. But it doesn't have to be that way. And we talked about training, we talked about policies, but what I thought was really powerful was this one junior who said, sometimes it's just a topic of conversation, just like we've been having. He was talking about the focus group we were in. It makes you so much more aware of the impact it has in your life when you just start thinking about it and talking about it. That's probably where I'd start, just having conversations with each other. And so one of the judges actually talked about pre-court meetings and post-court meetings. This is not something they're required to do, but they were saying this had made a difference to them, where we encourage people to challenge if there's something that they think hasn't necessarily gone the way it should have. We're saying, look, talk about it. And one of the younger barristers said to me, I think about culture change. I think about seeing the way people do things, and I'm realizing that this is how you can do things. You can do this job and be kind. And it's just been fascinating because I don't know if this seems like too different, but for me, there's a real alignment between what I was talking about right at the beginning with those 2 to 3-year-old children and this extension into the courts of law. It might seem like two completely different worlds, right? Children playing in a nursery school environment and barristers in a courtroom environment in front of a judge and how they're interacting with each other. But I just wanted to give you that example. We're doing some really interesting work in the media. We're doing some really interesting work in politics and, as I said, in business context as well. But there is, I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Let's see in the question time. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. To me, there is a really interesting alignment with what I started off talking about with those 2-year-old children sharing, helping, and positively playing in an interactive way with each other. And what you see for the rest of your lives. And that continuity to me is really fundamental. It tells you that tuning into each other, being empathic and being kind is always relevant. Not sometimes, it's always relevant because it's how human beings connect with each other. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll stop my share now. Thank you.
Wow. Robin, did we not tell you it was meant to be 3 hours?
We
Which
go all
is,
night, but I can see that, my goodness, there's been lots of messages in here. Oh my
there's
goodness.
been so many wonderful messages and really
Uh,
interesting discussions, and so you've provoked so much thinking. Robin, I could listen to you for hours and hours and hours.
did did
Always
I
so
did,
inspirational.
did I go too far? Did it feel like too much of a stretch, or did you see the link there between the
Absolutely
2-year-olds
saw the
and the
link.
barristers?
Absolutely saw at the link, total link, and the way that you have expressed how kindness and empathy transverses all age groups and all uh, uh, places and all position, the positionality that we always find ourselves in relies on those 5 factors that you that you showed so clearly that behavior, the emotion, the cognition, motivation, relationships, there are the grounds structures for absolutely everything. There's
Oh,
so many things, Robin, that I've been jotting down here and been so inspired by, that it's absolutely so wonderful. But before I summarize it all, I just want to share with you and with the audience, if I may, um, the photograph that I took to for the front cover of one of the articles that I wrote when I was head of Heart for Infants.
yeah.
Because just that photograph, I think, exemplifies nearly every word that you shared with us today. Let me see if I can find it here.
Oh, how lovely.
Can we see it?
Yes, we
Can you
can.
see
Oh,
it?
that's brilliant.
Okay, so this article that I wrote is called Nurturing Creative Thinking from an Early Age. And this I chose this photograph because it's just one of the most um, powerful examples of collaboration, of the output of what we're trying to cultivate at Heart for Infants in terms of culture and empathy and values and relationships and creativity and all the things that you were describing. I think this photograph was the culmination of all of that. When I saw this and experienced this happening, I thought, I can't ask for any more as a head teacher and been in
Oh,
education.
so lovely.
What we did, these are children in reception and nursery, so they're 3 and 4 years old. And what we did for one afternoon was we just bought new equipment. So this is all brand new equipment, which at the time was kind of very exciting to have. And I remember the Parents Association sort of gave us the funding for it, and we just put it all out in across the playground. And the children came out, and we just said, "There's your equipment," and there was no adult-led instruction, or it was just for them to experiment to. And look what they created this bike wash, which is just was so extraordinary because not only were they thinking about it and constructing it together, which was prior to this photograph, but then in the action of it, you can see, I think, every ounce of what you were portraying, Robin, in your talk, the sense of cooperation. Look at the smiles. And I have to say that the bikes were always a sense of competition, of wanting them to, because we didn't have one for each, of wanting to have them all. But look how everyone's got a job. She's got a ticket there and writing on the, just the purpose for writing in reception outdoors. They're all waiting so patiently. Look at those at the back, wait so patiently. And him giving the ticket, it was just so extraordinary to see this kind of playing out as we were experiencing it. Was just truly incredible. And this was a school where um, years before, you wouldn't have seen this in terms of behave, in terms of how their relationships with each other. It took exactly what you were saying, that sense of creating a totally values-based, relationship-based approach to lives. And I still remember, Robin, the very first time I met you, I think, in person, was when you invited me, whilst I was head of this school, to do one of your talks at Stanmer,
Oh, yes.
where you wanted me to focus on the work that I was doing on the triangular relationship between the school, the child, and the family.
Yeah, yeah.
I was describing all the things that we were doing in terms of the family interacting, and feeling part of the school community. And this is why this was so successful, because as you were saying, it's that whole sense of community that one develops in a scenario, in a social structure, which is so fascinating. I
Oh,
just
so lovely.
loved every aspect of your talk, Robin. There's so much, so thought provoking. The sociograms, as when you were starting, are such a key sort of promoter of inclusion and of equality and of what I call that personalized learning. So once the sociograms are so informative for teachers to develop the sense that every child matters and every child needs to be valued.
It's
Um,
just a springboard for really seeing every single child in the group and
yes.
understanding what we can do to actually build a community for every young person.
Exactly. And I was saying in the introduction earlier how somebody asked me how this can happen, empathy can happen in practice. And I was saying that the way that I describe it is by building classrooms that function as communities of inquiry. So then every single child feels equal, every single child feels valued, all the thinking is more questioning rather than fact, what people know. So it takes away that sense of having to be more intelligent, less intelligent, because it's just everyone's inquiring together and often inquiring into things that nobody knows, which is my passion. Um,
Absolutely. And being
um,
comfortable with that space,
and
right?
being comfortable in that space, exactly. So being comfortable with being uncomfortable, absolutely right. So yeah, so much. And I love the way that you linked it to professional lives. And it was incredible, which I put in the chat, because yesterday we had a session where students from the University of Sussex got together with students from the University of California, and we had some of our wonderful Kazakhstan scholars also join that
Oh, wonderful.
session. And we discussed empathy across a global international context in terms of what it means for us in our personal lives. But then I couldn't believe it when you said what it means to us in our professional life.
Yeah,
And then we finished with what it means to us in terms of being able of using empathy to create a better world,
absolutely.
which
Absolutely.
is so well
Love
and
all of
just
that.
so resonating so much with
Oh, thank you so
what you were
much.
saying.
Well, it's
So
been an absolute pleasure to speak with you, and I have to say I'm just scrolling through the messages. Thank you so much for your really lovely comments. It's wonderful to see, and I can see so many points, so many really helpful points there, and suggestions of things to look at, which I will really learn from. So thank you very much. I'm really glad that it all resonated with you. Thank you very much.
so wonderful. And we would anybody in the audience would like to ask or make a comment to Robin just before Robin goes? Feel free.
Yeah, this work is so wonderful. It is
Oh,
just
thank
so
you.
wonderful. It's such a joy to see you working on kindness and to see how it is growing in different countries and the collaborations and the importance of this work. And the judges so much need kindness. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate that, Yana.
Thank you so much, Robin. We can't thank you enough. You've
Thank you. You've been absolutely
illuminated our
wonderful, and
conference beyond.
I will enjoy reading through all the chat messages. I'll save that.
Yes, and
And
you've really illuminated our conference beyond all expectations. So thank you so much.
thank you. Lovely to see you all. Have a really good rest of the conference, and I will look forward
Thank
to
you.
catching up on the recordings as well. And I cannot wait to listen to the poetry as well. That sounds amazing. So I'll
Yes,
follow that up.
absolutely.
Take
Brilliant.
care. Thank
Thank
you,
you
everyone.
so much again. Thank you.
Bye bye.
That was so amazing. I promised you, didn't I, that it was going to be really, really amazing. And it was. I hope you really enjoyed it. I hope it's given you um, so much space to think and to reflect with all the points that Robin was making. You know, I was just so, so delighted. Brilliant.
It just brings me a lot of joy to know that there are so many people who are working with Robin on this topic and that they have real evidence and practices that can work. That is very heartening for me, and I can't wait to dive into it and look at it really soon. So that was
Yeah.
a fabulous talk. Thank you for arranging that. That was really, really wonderful.
Yeah. And the lucky thing is that he's at my university.
Yeah, you are lucky.
Uh, Wonderful. So now we're moving on to another really fascinating area, um, and which we've heard a little bit about, but I'll formally introduce you now, Edwin. It's a really, really huge honor for us to have our next keynote speaker, Edwin Rutsch, who is the director of the Empathy Center in Santa Barbara, California. I'm so, so delighted that you're with us today and part of our Global Empathy Conference. Edwin Rush is the founding director of the Empathy Center in Santa Barbara, California, and he's worked for over 15 years on building a more mutually empathetic world, which is just such a wonderful, wonderful concept. Edwin is the developer and champion of the Empathy Circle process, which is based on active listening and participating. So thank you so, so much, Edwin, and your team for coming to be part of our conference today.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Marcelo and Paramita and Sharmila for inviting me to speak on my favorite topic in the world, which is empathy. And it warms my heart to be here and really happy to be here with a group of other people who are working on creating a more empathic society, which is really what my passion is about. So I'm going to start off by sharing. Oh, and I'll also mention I'm really excited to follow Robin's work because he really put a focus on relationships. And I think that's really something that's missing is that focus on sort of a holistic empathy, which really looks at people and their relationships. So I'm going to share my screen here. I have a little slideshow. And hopefully you're able to see that. And there we go. And this presentation is about defining empathy in the context of the empathy circle. And this photograph that you see here is an empathy circle at the University of California at Berkeley. Our empathy center, we no longer have that in Santa Barbara. So I'm here in the Bay Area near the University of California, near Berkeley. And we do have multiple chapters, empathy center chapters in different cities. They still have one in Santa Barbara and the Bay Area and other cities and towns. And as I was saying, this is our group. We have this empathy tent where we go out to public places and we offer listening to the public. And we were here at UC Berkeley and just had all these students who were wanting to learn how to take part in the empathy circle. And you can see some more circles out in the back there. Part of our team is holding those. And these are college students there at the university. So the Empathy Center that I'm the director of has the mission to build the empathy movement. And that's with, really the goal of making mutual empathy a primary, personal, cultural, societal value. And one of our goals is to teach all 8 billion people in the world how to take part in an empathy circle, which, we've talked about a little bit before. And I'll give more of an explanation in a little bit later about how that works. And this, I think, can really help make the world a better place, to spread empathy. And we all know, this is a core group here of people who are supportive of empathy. Why empathy is so important. It's going to build stronger relationships and connections, your teamwork and collaboration. You could see the quality of the schools, the group, the students, being together with higher empathy that improves their collaboration. It's core to effective teamwork, increased personal and social well-being when you're listened to and listen to others. It just helps your whole body, whole way of being to be better and function better, be more effective, and I think a lot of health benefits as well. And there's greater social cohesion and especially conflict resolution. We use empathy a lot for conflict resolution, and I could talk for a whole presentation, a whole day, just on the many benefits of empathy. However, but there's a lot of recent criticisms of empathy. There's a whole bunch of books and articles, and especially here in the United States, coming out that are critical of empathy. There's this book, Suicidal Empathy, that's coming out. There's one that's very popular coming out, that's out already, is called Toxic Empathy. And the author there says, toxic empathy demands our empathy only go one direction, towards the party the progressive worldview deems oppressed. And then there's another book, which you may have heard of before. This is called Against Empathy. And this is by Paul Bloom, who's a professor at Yale University, which is one of our elite universities in the United States. It's where a lot of top politicians come from. And he's saying it can spark violence. Our empathy for those close to us is a powerful force for war and atrocity towards others. So, saying if you have empathy towards your family members, that this is going to lead to be a force for war and atrocity. So that's really quite critical. There's also another criticism is from Elon Musk, who is the richest person in the world. He just recently said the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. And so we have the, most important, the richest person in the world, being negative about empathy. And then we have this book called The Dark Side of Empathy, which is by another academic professor at an American university, Fritz Breithaupt. He says, empathy can fuel revenge. When people deeply empathize with victims, they may become more aggressive towards those they perceive as perpetrators. And there's even more. There's just so many books recently coming out. There's The Sin of Empathy. So this is by an evangelical, right-wing minister. He says, empathy demands that we enter into someone's world, into someone's emotional world so fully that we adopt their perspective uncritically and can lead us away from truth. And I'm going to stop the share here and share again, because I just forgot to turn on the sound, so I can share with you the next video clip. And in our Congress, when Barack Obama was president and choosing a Supreme Court justice, he said he wanted to choose a justice that had empathy as one of the core values. And there was a big debate in Congress about empathy. And this is one of the senators who was talking about it.
And anyway, what is empathy? What is empathy? Is this your personal feeling that you had a tough childhood, or something prejudice that you have? You're Protestant or Catholic, your ethnicity, your race, some biases you brought with you to life and to the court? Is that what an empathy is?
So yeah, so you can see that even our senators are kind of confused about what empathy is, and are asking, what is empathy? So another criticism was recently in a magazine called the newspaper, the Chicago Tribune, and the author in the article titled "The Dangerous Consequences of Radical Empathy Unchecked by Reason." He says, "It is in its most radical form, empathy demands unconditional allegiance to perceived victims, often at the expense of truth, reason, and moral clarity." And I have reached out to all of the authors of these different articles and books, and I said, "Hey, would you like to talk about it? I really want to empathize with you. I want to hear what your point of view is and have a dialogue." And most of them are not willing to even talk about their criticisms of empathy. And there was, fortunately, the author of this article, Kevin Waldman. He was willing to dialogue with me. And what I really find, as I look at all these criticisms of empathy, is that I would say 90% of the criticisms are based on a lack of understanding what empathy is. We're talking about different experiences and different phenomena, so we're sort of really just talking past each other. So I talked with Kevin and had a really great conversation, really enjoyed it. And there's a recording of it, on my website. And with having a clear definition of empathy, I was able to explain to him what I meant by empathy. We looked at what he meant by empathy and how what he was talking about wasn't really empathy. And so I just got a little bit of feedback, but echo. So let me see. So anyway, by having a clear definition, I was able to, talk with him, come to actually some common ground and some common understanding, to the point where he now wants to hold empathy circles on his campus. And I'm pretty excited about that. So we really came by having a clear definition and being able to, dialogue with the critics of empathy to actually, I think we can bring them around. And the current definitions, I think, are very problematic. And the first thing is there's a lack of consensus. There's a lot of the academic definitions. I think there's a lot of disagreement and kind of confusion about what empathy really is. And because of all these criticisms, I think that shows that there's a lack of understanding, a clear definition. Because it wouldn't, I think, if people really clearly, if the definition of empathy was clearly articulated, we wouldn't be having these criticisms of empathy. People actually, I think, would be very supportive of empathy. And the other problem I see is that it can be very abstract. It can be very, the definitions can be very dry, not easy to understand, and especially like this definition of affective and cognitive empathy that's very popular definition. And that's why we need a clear and a practical definition. And what I'm proposing as a definition is the holistic empathy as a definition. And that's, again, why I'm so excited about, Robin's work. He's talking about relational empathy, and that's what holistic empathy is really about. It's giving a name to the relationship between people, the mutual empathy. And the parts, you can kind of break down the holistic empathy into different parts. And they are basic empathy, self-empathy, imaginative empathy, and holistic empathy. And it's also the definition is grounded in the empathy circle practice, so that you can clearly experience the different aspects of the empathy circles. And that's to kind of take it out of the abstract and really put it into a form that you can take part in an empathy circle and you can actually experience the different aspects of empathy and clearly put a name to it. And we have people joining here, I see. And I'll go into depth on each one of these aspects. So first thing is why define empathy in the context of the empathy circle? And I was sort of mentioning that already. It takes the definition out of the abstract, it makes it concrete. You can experience the definition, and especially you'll be able to map other definitions onto the empathy circle, and actually see where they have how they're explaining their definition, and you can map your personal definition onto the experience in the empathy circle, and also the criticisms too. So I think it'll really help with getting a sense of clarity. And let's see the next slide. So this is an empathy circle. And for those not familiar with the empathy circle, I'll just give a short little definition or explanation of how it works. So an empathy circle is usually, 4 to 7 people in a circle, and there's 4 roles. You'll see on the left is the speaker who's going to be speaking, and you only have one person speaking at a time. There's the active listener who's going to be listening to them and kind of reflecting back their understanding of what the speaker says. And then there's the others in the circle who are going to be just silent listeners, just paying attention. And then we have often a fourth role, and that's the facilitator who keeps time and just kind of keeps the process going, especially for the first couple of times when people aren't familiar with the practice. Once you know the practice, you don't even need a facilitator because everybody knows the process. So the speaker in this situation speaks, and the active listener reflects back their understanding of what the speaker says. So for example, the speaker might say, "Oh, I'm so excited to be here at the International Empathy Conference. Empathy is very important to me." And the active listener reflects back their understanding by saying, "Oh, you feel excited being here, and empathy is very important to you." And the goal is for the speaker to really feel heard and understood, to their satisfaction. And then they have a limited time, maybe 4 or 5 minutes to speak. Then the roles change, and the active listener becomes the speaker, and they select another active listener, and the process continues like that for the time allotted. Now, this work is based on the work of Carl Rogers, and Carl Rogers was already working on empathy in the 1940s, 50s, 60s until his death in 1980s. And he developed the active listening process that we use, but he used it in a client therapy situation. So that's a picture of him listening to a client, as a therapist, he would listen, and he would only do that. He would only empathize with them and do active listening. And, but this was a one-way, one-directional empathy. So he, as the therapist, would listen to the client and just empathize with them for the entire, hour or however long their session is. But in the empathy circle, we don't have everybody's equal. Everybody listens to everyone else. So we're really taking it out of the therapeutic realm and putting it into the relation, into just human relationships. And so this is it. That's the basic empathy, is the active listener just listening to the speaker. That's what we would call, the basic empathy, or maybe most people would just call that empathy, that basic listening. And you're listening attentively as the active listener to the whole person, their feelings, their thoughts, their values, their hopes, desires. You're listening, their thought, just the whole being. You're trying to listen, you're feeling and thinking yourself into the inner life of the other person. And, as I said, since Carl Rogers sort of developed this practice and really articulated a lot of the fundamental concepts of empathy, the way he described this is, he says, empathy is the listener's effort to hear the other person deeply, accurately, and non-judgmentally. Empathy involves listening, skillful, reflective listening that amplifies the person's own experiencing and meaning without imposing the listener's own material. So you're just listening to the active listener is just listening, empathizing with the speaker, and just tensing into their experience. And that's what Rogers is describing here. And he also has another explanation of it. He says, an empathic way of being with another person has several facets. It means entering the private perceptual world of the other and becoming thoroughly at home in it. It involves being sensitive moment to moment to the changing felt meanings which flow in the other person, to the fear and rage of tenderness, confusion, or whatever he or she is experiencing. So you're just listening to the whole person. So that's basic empathy, and Rogers really describes that well, and he really, in his work, really explored that topic quite extensively. The next part of is self-empathy, and that's feeling and sensing into yourself. It means turning that empathy into towards your own personal experience. I think Paramita was talking about the teacher, the teacher or the healthcare worker, they need to have empathy for themselves too and not get burned out. And they have to know what's happening for themselves too. And the one thing in the empathy circle, what you'll find is that when the listener listens to the speaker, that actually supports the speaker in self-empathy, going deeper into their own personal experience, and it supports stress reduction, prevents emotional numbness, I think fosters creativity, and just so many other benefits that it has. And then Rogers, he didn't use the word self-empathy in his writings. I've never seen him use the word self-empathy, but he hinted at this experience, because he said being listened to by someone who understands makes it possible for persons to listen more accurately to themselves with greater empathy towards their own visceral experiencing, their own vaguely felt meanings. So again, that's the speaker, is being heard, and they're able to get more in touch with their own feelings and empathize with themselves. So having the term self-empathy, I think, is helpful to understand that experience. So the next part of the holistic empathy model is imaginative empathy. And we don't talk too much about that in the empathy circle, but we do in our empathy circle facilitator training, we do use this. And we want to explain how, we want to train people in how to do conflict mediation using the empathy circle. So what we do is we create a scenario where there's a family in conflict because, their parents just died, and the siblings, the adult, brothers and sisters, are in conflict with each other because they all feel they should get the inheritance. And so they're having arguments. They're kind of like Robin was saying about the lawyers, the barristers, these people are sort of fighting it out. And we can use the empathy circle to role play that. And when you take on the role of one of the family members, you're sort of doing this, you're imagining yourself in that role. And so it's a very powerful practice, and also leads to a lot of creativity. And that's a lot like actors do. Actors do this imaginative empathy, right? So this is the actor Meryl Streep. She was Margaret Thatcher acted as Margaret Thatcher in the movie. And she was also Julia Child. She takes on that role. So she's imagining herself in those roles. And she says, I've thought a lot about the power of empathy in my work. It's the current that connects me and my actual pulse to a fictional character in a made-up story. It allows me to pretend feeling sorrows and imagine pain. So, we could say this is these are all actors, all roles that Meryl Streep did. So they could actually all be part of an empathy circle and do sort of double layer. They could be doing imaginative empathy and basic empathy at the same time. And you as a person, we can all take on roles, like we take on the role of being an animal, and then imagine ourselves as being an animal, and then having a dialogue with each other, right? As animals, and that's sort of using our imaginative empathy. We're putting ourselves into the role of those animals, not just people, but animals. And we can even imagine ourselves being fruit, for that matter, right? So, and have a dialogue as fruit. So, children are really good at this, kind of doing role playing, and they love it. And here's the image I had of that. So that's the imaginative empathy, and you'll find often in that model, the affective cognitive empathy model, they call it cognitive empathy. And I think imaginative empathy is more accurate, and it's a sexier, more fun, term than the dry, cognitive empathy. So the other part is the holistic empathy, and holistic empathy is the quality or level of empathy in the relationship, which again is what Robin was talking about. And empathy is usually in academia, especially, and pretty much everywhere, primarily described as an individualistic process. It's one person empathizing with another, but there's really a holistic empathy. There's a whole relationship of people in a relationship, and where everyone in the empathy circle, everyone listens to everyone else. So there's a whole quality of empathy in the relationship, and that quality can be high or low. It can be in a group that's very low empathy. And you've probably walked into a room and felt the energy of the room. For example, holistic empathy is feeling into the community. So here we're in an environment where it's a memorial for someone that's just died, and you can feel the sadness, you can feel the wholeness of the group energy, the group feeling, and you can sort of sense into that feeling. And then here's a low energy, empathy, right? This group is they feel anger and aggression and threatening and menacing, and I'd say that's kind of like a low empathy, group, holistic, low empathy environment. And then here's a dancers out in the forest, dancing. They're open, they're inviting, accepting, inviting you in to join the dance, and that would be a higher level of empathy. And so holistic empathy is in the empathy circle. You have the different qualities of, basic empathy, imaginative empathy, and these different levels of empathy, and they create this quality of holistic empathy. And the qualities of holistic empathy is, or the aspects is, basic empathy, you're sensing into other people's experience. Self-empathy, you're sensing into your own experience. Imaginative empathy, you're sensing in with your imagination. And holistic empathy is sensing into the communities, includes, basic, self, and imaginative. So it's sort of this whole relationship. So giving a name to that relationship could be a whole culture, right? A whole country can have a level of holistic empathy. So some of the qualities of holistic empathy is, I would say, openness. You're authentically expressing what's going on for you, and open to others instead of being closed and defensive. You have a sense of care. You're valuing the worth and dignity of everyone instead of indifference. You're being present, full attention to the present moment, self and others, instead of disengaged, distracted. You're non-judgmental. You're listening without criticism. You're curious, instead of apathetic. And it's the mutuality. Empathy is shared, reciprocal, rather than just one-sided relationship. And so for next steps, what I invite you to do is, take part in the empathy circle. We're going to take part, in it a little bit later today. And you can explore how do your definitions fit in the empathy circle. Take part in the empathy circle and say, well, this is where empathy is. This is what I'm doing, and this is what, where the empathy is. And take a look at the other definitions of empathy, especially this affective, cognitive, empathic concern model, which I'd love to go into that. I'm going to be doing some presentations on that later at another time, but I just don't have time for it here. And then also take a look at the criticisms of empathy, how they fit, into the holistic empathy model, as well as into the empathy circle. And with that, I will bring it to a close, trying to stay on time here with my time. And thanks again for inviting me. And do join the circle. The chairs are here waiting for you to come and sit down and take part.
Thank you so much, Edwin. What a wonderful, wonderful travel through so many aspects of empathy that I hadn't really considered, and all it's just fascinating to see how you've constructed all those different aspects of being empathetic, and within within the empathy circle system. How fascinating! So we really look forward to forming part of that later on in the session, actually, in the conference day, and experiencing it. But apart from today, Edwin, if people want to join and be part of your empathy circles that you run, what is the process that people need to undertake?
Yeah, I can just quickly put that into the into the chat. So the link is the empathycenter.org. There's our organization. From there, it'll link you to the Empathy Circle website. We have an empathy summit. We hold every 3 months. We hold a summit on empathy as well. You're all welcome. Also welcome to be speakers. And then there's my email, and it's also Jana's email when we do the Empathy Circle later.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I'm sure you'll be getting a whole lot of interest after today. Thank you so much, Edwin.
And I would say, Marcelo, you're saying about how to continue the process.
Yes.
I would invite you to hold empathy circles, periodic, and then have different topics, so you can, students, whoever, can take part in an empathy circle, kind of practice, and also have a chance to maybe talk about what's going on in their lives or thoughts about empathy. And we'd be glad to support that, help, promote that, or help facilitate, get that going.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you so much, and thank you, Jana, in advance as well. Wonderful.